All right, so now we're coming to the end of the just INTJ section of the cognitive function analysis of what went on in that interview. And there was something right at the end, at the 16-minute, 38-second mark that came in. And it was the tail end of that section about, the anecdotal section about how much Sallie loves shopping for a car. As every girly girl does, you know, like, where she said, and this was really interesting, where she said, you know, speaking of her own process in doing that thing, that when she gets to, and notice again, this sort of general application, principled quality to her own observations of what she does. If she were a censor, very much more often what would be the case is if someone were interviewing her about, you know, what do you do and why, the answers would be much more focused on, okay, this is exactly what I do. Like, if you were in the room with me while I was doing it, this is what you would see. Like, that's just plain English. That's it, you know, this is what I do. And then as to the why, it would be very focused on, you know, again, more sort of shorter range, real world significance of whatever that is, you know, that's very, very, very practical and very down to earth kind of stuff. You'll notice just generally that when you're talking to someone who has a dominant intuitive cognitive function, that would be ENTP or ENFP or INFJ or INTJ, and you will see it with those who have it, an intuitive function in the auxiliary position too. You'll see it a lot. But you'll see it with us in every 3 minutes of everything we say, all the time. You know, if you look for it, you're going to see it, because we can't help it. It's just it's part of the mainframe of what we are. So it's going to come out some way or another. And I think you see, here's where we see a beautiful thing that would serve as a great, this would be a thing that if I were just focusing in that conversation on typing Sallie, if she didn't know what her type was, and let's say at this point I was like, she's definitely an INJ, but I'm not sure which one, this item I'm about to speak of would be the thing where I'm like, done. Like, okay, now I know what my judgment is, like what my suggestion would be to her as to which type I think she is and what I suggest she look into further in typing herself. When she says, I go into it, this shopping around for a car and researching everything I need to know. But she said, when I get to the point of ruminating about it and it starts to feel bad, note what she says. She's like, I have a rule. INTJ, J, cut things off when they need to be cut off. You know, make decisions, move on, and all that kind of thing. Be organized. Allocate the resources properly to affect things in the outer world the way you want. She's like, when I find myself getting like just way into it and it starts to feel bad, I have a rule that I stop. And she's like, it's time to make a decision, you know? Now that is absolutely contrary to what we hear all over the place coming from the INFJs. You hear this thing from the INFJs all the time about getting stuck in the NITI loop, where it just goes on and on and on, and they can't stop. Like, they can't stop ruminating, and they drive themselves crazy with it, because they can recognize that at a certain point it's just you know, it's exhausting and preoccupying and unpleasant, but they find it very hard to get. Sometimes they find it very hard to get out of. Not so this INTJ, and I would wager most other INTJs. They have a much easier time sort of going, again, when it comes to like knowledge building and figuring stuff out, they have as opposed to the INFJs, they tend to have a much easier time, and they have much more clarity of mind to sort of just go, say good enough. They're able to say that more sort of effectively and reliably than people of many other types as well. Where they're like, I recognize that we're at the point where we can move on to the next thing, so we can be maximally efficient and effective and get this show on the road, solve this problem in the strategic planning. So let's stop here. We know enough now. And again, you find people with heavy duty TI, they don't say that very often. The people who have TI, like especially the INTPs, who have that big imagination and the creative thinking drive going on with their auxiliary extroverted intuition, and then they have TI running their show. Like, TI is about figuring things out to the ultimate extent. And that's a very strong drive for them. So you will not hear them saying very often of like, oh, this is, mostly true. So let's just go with these, let's behave as if it is true. Like, that's something people with TE will do much more easily than people with prominent TI. So you see that here. I feel like that's a very big differentiator right there for Sallie. She's, even if she came to me and she's like, oh, I'm totally an INFJ, and she said something like that, I'd be like, are you though? Like, I'd be diplomatic about it, but I would push a bit about like, really, are you sure? Because that really doesn't sound like INFJ to me. So there. All right. Now moving into section 4. Where are we? Okay. Another thing I think is neat here, here's where I think Sallie is giving an example of using her dominant NI. But I think, interestingly, in a very interpersonal realm, is how she talks about sort of an approach that she has that she's found to be effective. But she says, like, really being, it's kind of vague, but I mean, I felt like I knew what she meant. Really, that part of the therapeutic alliance that she establishes with her clients is to really be with them. And I think that I think all three of us, being really interested in psychological matters and adept in that stuff, I think we just sort of had the understanding that, that can be very affirming and healing in and of itself for people who have grown up feeling really or have gone into periods of their lives where they feel very alienated from those around them. They feel misunderstood. They don't feel the full human connection that every human, even the NT robots, needs some of, that can be really, really hard. And that can actually, if that's not enough to constitute a psychological mental health issue in itself, it certainly contributes to worsening other conditions you might have or problems you might be struggling with on the psychological, emotional level. And so, she does that. And how is she doing that? As an INTJ, I imagine what she's doing is, she's making heavy use of these sort of insight finding that NI in action does. Again, where they just sort of, a powerful NI that has been used and developed and practiced in using, and that, like, someone who has that as a dominant function, who's become like confident in the use of that function mentally, is going to be able to come up with some pretty tremendous insights coming out of nowhere, that can be really helpful. And then if their life experience has sort of taught them to esteem that ability, even if they can't always demonstrate exactly how they knew what they knew, how they came to know what they knew, and they learn to develop well and not sweat it too much that they can't explain where their insights came from, but just to develop confidence in those insights and then try and use them those insights in a useful way and with others, or in developing, again, sort of plans and concepts. I think that's what she's probably using a lot of in just being with people, right? That's a powerful, powerful thing. Then there was another thing that was again, you saw me like squeal. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm sorry I blew your eardrums out with this, but I'll never do that again with the camera, terrible camera scraping sounds and like too much. Anyway, horrible audio. Anyhow, she says near the 11-minute, 15-second mark of video 4, the last video of that interview, CJ and I are laughing our asses off because about this thing that I was so INTJ typical. Oh my God, where I had seen, apparently, according to CJ and her reaction, she's teasing her friend about it, where she's like, what, very often Sallie has given her occasion to sort of go like, what? Like, what did you just say? What do you mean by that? And in the few days they just were sort of around the house now and then, like I saw Sallie do that a couple of times and I really laughed and I really enjoyed it. And I have laughed and enjoyed that kind of thing with the other INTJs I know. I don't know how many times with my favorite INTJs that has happened. It's one of the things I love about them is when they come out, and here's what it is. I didn't say specifically in the interview what it really is. It's a cryptic, very often this cryptic. And this is what's also different from INFJs. Like INFJs do something very similar with their dominant, the expression of the fruits of their dominant introverted intuition. But what an INFJ is, anyway, sorry. Back to INTJ. What makes it INTJ-specific is that these cryptic pronouncements that they sometimes make, usually what they are is a summarization. They're expression of a conclusion that they've drawn after totally behind the scenes without talking to anybody else about it, that they've been like quietly working on inside themselves using their heavy duty NI and their T, but really heavy the NI of really thinking through a problem or whatever it is of interest, and then judging it. Right? They're judging it. They're using the TE and kind of and sorting through all these insights and weird ideas and things that came to them out of the blue, and also what they've observed outside, when they do look outside, and then synthesizing that into a conclusion, a meaningful summary of something. And what's so funny about it is that they very often don't seem to realize, like they're not doing it to be funny, of course. They're not, again, they don't waste their time. They're not like presenting some things that no one else is going to get, knowing that no one else is going to get it. They just do it. And then all the rest of us are like, boing, what? Say that, come again, please. And yeah, exactly as I described in the interview. That's how it goes. They'll make the pronouncement, and then, you'll be shocked and curious and ask them what it is, and then they will explain it. And I found and again, like I can really make some leaps, but with my INTJs, sometimes even with me, like mind wide open, like very creative thinking, very leaping around and connecting stuff that other people don't see. But even with me, like often my INTJs will have to, they'll have to do a few essays, are going to have to take a run at it a couple of times, and finally I'll get it, finally I'll get it. But they seem to innocently truly be not aware that to arrive at the thing they've arrived at, there is so much back end, like leaps that had to be gone through before they got to that conclusion, and that the rest of us didn't do that. We didn't see that, they didn't share it with us. Our minds don't work that way. We didn't even entertain we didn't even identify what this problem was that they did, and worked something out about. So, hilarious. That was great. That was so great. Classic INTJ, that moment was. And I would say too, this is a differentiator with INFJ too. INFJs will also like arrive at these really startling observations about things that are, again, very true. And interesting and full of insight. But usually the way they're going to present it is going to be, again, with that FE auxiliary, they're going to put more effort, again, naturally, they're going to put more effort into making it easily accessible to who they're speaking to their audience. Whereas an INTJ, that's kind of an afterthought. Like they need to be prompted to do that. INFJ will naturally think of that probably, and also of like what's socially acceptable, and like all those kinds of FE related stuff, of course, comes much more naturally to INFJs than to INTJs. So that kind of like frankness, like blah, there you go, take it or leave it kind of attitude about delivering the summary, or an INFJ will make an observation, and it'll be sort of more accessible, maybe more diplomatic, maybe more on that side, whereas INTJ is just like, blah, there you go. Yeah, take it or leave it. And they need to be prompted to like put the effort in to explain it, but they're happy to do so, like they don't want, again, they're pragmatic. They don't want to have gone to all that work working something out only to have nobody understand what the hell they're talking about. So yeah, if you're right there with them and you're showing the interest, they're like, all right, I'll put the effort in then. So great. Okay, finally, that's the end of the INTJ specific part. What's coming up next? I'm going to be talking about some INFP related stuff. that CJ came up with. That's, I think, very typical of INFPs and a lot of the stuff they do. And you know, you might, maybe you'll be surprised, we'll see, about how, some stuff related to the INFP that has to do with the rest of us in the group too. Coming up next.